Sometimes the scariest thing in a book is not the big creepy monster. It's that monster you see looking back at you when you look in the mirror. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back to close down the reviews for spooky season as we're talking about the 1954 horror sci-fi classic I Am Legend by Mr. Richard Matheson, a book I think that needs no real introduction. I feel like everyone's at least heard of this, be it just because of the movie or because you're into horror and sci-fi and you've heard about the classic by Mr. Richard Matheson. Again, a book that's highly influential. In fact, this book actually popularized the zombie apocalypse kind of trope that you see just about everywhere now. It's made 3 movies now. They made, The Last Man on Earth, they made The Omega Man, and then, of course, I Am Legend. It's the most recent attempt. I wouldn't be shocked if they do it again because I don't feel like they've ever exactly got this book right and what made it really special. But I actually read this book for the first time in high school for 2 reasons. I was really into a band called White Zombie at the time. You guys ever heard of that? You might not. If you haven't, you've probably heard of Rob Zombie before he became a horror director and a solo artist. He, in this band, White Zombie, on their 1992 album, L'Exorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1, there was a song called I Am Legend. And of course, this piqued my interest because I just got fascinated with the lyrics to this song. And then I think at the time, it might have been Hit Parader. I don't remember all the music magazines I used to get back then. Yes, we used to actually get magazines about rock music. Wow, times have changed, haven't they? But there was an article in there, and they were talking about the album, and they brought up how influential this book was. And I was like, I'm always looking for new recommendations for books. I was still new in town. Didn't know anybody. Again, had this awesome extensive library at my high school, and of course they did have the book, and I read it, and I loved it. And then I heard Romero talking about it, George Romero, who made Night of the Living Dead, and he was talking about how that book actually influenced him to make that movie, which has pretty much popularized everything zombie apocalypse. But this book is actually about vampires, right? Right? Well, we're going to talk about it, guys. This was number 9 on my top 10 horror novels of all time that I did last year. So now upon revisiting it, what did I think about it? Well, guys, we're going to do that and more as we talk about what is the book about. Now, Robert Neville may well be the last living man on Earth, but he is not alone. An incurable plague has mutated every other man, woman, and child into bloodthirsty, nocturnal creatures who are determined to destroy him. By day, he is a hunter, stalking the infested monstrosities through the abandoned ruins of civilization. By night, he barricades himself in his home and prays for dawn. But how long can a man survive like this, and how long would he want to? And guys, 1954, I Am Legend. Now, when you begin with what makes this book good or bad, I think the good that I'm going to start with here is I don't think that there's a single book out there that captures loneliness and solitude quite as well as this. Like I said, there are big scary monsters in this, but it's his time alone with his thoughts that really are just a view into trying to keep your sanity in a situation such as this. And, not only just trying to keep your sanity, but just trying to struggle for a reason to go on, because who wants to survive in a world like this where you're the last person alive, at least you believe, and anything else that's out there is just trying to kill you every single night. So it presents a lot of those questions, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I think with this one, his flashbacks that he has, Dr. Neville's flashbacks to when society was falling, and seeing what happens to this man's family is just bone crushing. I mean, you just cannot believe how vicious Matheson was with some of this stuff. But it captures the event, that big event well in the form of flashbacks, and it makes the character more relatable, which can seem kind of unlikable when you start the story. Obviously, he gives zero fucks at this point, but I think that it really does shine a light on why, outside of the obvious reasons why he is quite this damaged of a character. And seeing what happened to his family, like I said, it'll just absolutely crush you, especially if you have children. I think that will get to you. But really, if you have a soul, I think it's going to hurt you just a little bit. Now, this is sold as a vampire book. I mean, look at the front cover, guys. I mean, this, by the way, another awesome Folio Society edition. But this front cover obviously just looks like a good old vampire book. And that's what this really is kind of sold as. And it would seem like that. But these aren't like Bram Stoker's vampires, right? These are a little different. They actually share a lot more with zombies, I think, than they do with vampires. And I think it's very much like a zombie vampire hybrid. I'm not going to tell you exactly what is happening with them because I want you to figure that out for yourself. But you'll see it isn't quite the traditional vampire because, like crucifixes work on some of them and they don't on others. And it'll explain why that works, why the whole thing with garlic, all this kind of stuff, why they can only come out at night. So you get a lot of those different themes with vampires, but they are very, very different than most vampires you read. And I think at this time, what made this so special was everyone was writing vampires with the rules that Bram Stoker had established. And this was one of the first ones that I can recall going through my time reading some of these, that I can see that someone was willing to do something a little different, could kind of bend the rules a little bit. And I think that, it really did open the door for other people to do different kind of takes on vampires, which now you have all kinds of different spins on vampires. But I like that the science in this is not really, I say it's not dumbed down, but it's put in layman's terms, almost like a Michael Crichton kind of way, in that he's talking about very heavy scientific stuff here, but he explains it in a way that you can understand. I mean, lots of talks about like symbiotes and parasites and psychological conditioning, things like that. So you're going to be like, okay, you're going to have to put your thinking cap on, I guess I would call it. But it's never to a point where like, this is just scientific mumbo jumbo. I'm just going to kind of glaze over and get through this. But it does explain what's going on in a believable way, especially when you think about where science studies were in 1954. It's actually quite impressive what he's able to do here. But it deals with a little bit of everything in this book with its themes. I mean, otherness, grief, loneliness. I already talked about depression, survival, compromise. Compromise, I think, is a big one. Just perseverance, really. Just that attitude of, let's make it through one more day, make it through one more night, I guess would be the better way to put that. But it really does deal with that and trying to maintain your sanity in just a disgusting world. And this really does feel like the bridge from Stoker's vampires to trying something new. But I get the ending to this, guys, is a hell of a thinker, and it's going to stick in your head for weeks, months, maybe years. Like I still think about it from time to time, because it presents a lot of questions that I think people were kind of scared to ask at the time period. A lot of people now, they look at classic sci-fi and horror and they say, well, how problematic is it? Because, people had different beliefs at that time. Guys, sci-fi and horror and fantasy was very progressive for the time. They were writing about the stuff that other people weren't really willing to do. So I think that can't always be applied. And some of the questions that Matheson asks here are probably quite taboo at the time. But I'll get a little more into that in my final thoughts. Talk about a couple of the bad things here. Some of these might be bad for you. I didn't necessarily find them because I feel like this is more of a character study than just a straight horror story. So it's not action-packed. And it can seem slow because you are just inside Neville's head here. So there might be some times you're like, okay, well, I need something to happen. It is a very slow burn, but again, guys, it's not a long book, so I think you're going to be fine with that. But just don't be expecting this isn't, Abraham Lincoln vampire killer here. This is going to be, very, very slow paced for the most part, but it does have good action scenes in it. But it's not anything I would call an action book. Some of the science is going to seem outdated for what, a 65, 67-year-old book now. I think you're going to find some of that science maybe a little outdated, but like I said, it's a very satisfying, especially if you can look at it under the lens of when it was written. And it's a book that can be quite depressing, guys. It's not really an uplifting read. Much like I said when I talked about The Girl Next Door, I think maybe you should be in a good place when you read this, because if you are someone who suffers from depression, this book's not really going to lift you up very much. In fact, it might open up some wounds that you've been hiding, because it does ask a lot of questions, like I said, that someone who suffers from that might find themselves starting to ask themselves while reading it. But guys, let's get into why I think that you should read it, why you enjoy it here. This is a classic, I think, that has inspired generations since. There's lots of things that still pull themes and ideas that were presented with this book. And no other book, I think, has ever been able to capture solitude quite so well. You feel for this man, and you just want to jump in the page and be his friend, because this guy is so lonely. And I think that the way that he captures that is just so written so well. He really was good at this. And it focuses on being alone as the scariest thing, not just the monsters that are coming, the questions of being alone, but also, you know, humanity's place, and you know, do they deserve this? Did they bring this upon themselves, and other things? And ask the question of if this is a world worth living in at this point, where it's at right now with all this going on. It'll make you think. It really, really will. And I think that's why, if you're not just for the influential side of it alone, to see what inspired, you know, Night of the Living Dead, what inspired this whole genre as a whole, I think you kind of owe it yourself. I always say read the pillars of, you know, science fiction and fantasy. I very much think this is one of the sci-fi horror pillars that I could think of out there that would really say, you could say this influenced so much. It's an important read that I think that everyone owes it to themselves to go back and see what made this so special and inspires so many people. And I think that you'll find more than one thing that you like. But let's get into some final thoughts here, guys. I think that this book resonated with me because it asks the hard questions, and it presents some really, really big ideas. It's the emotional impact of examining the human condition, especially under duress. I think that when you're getting inside of Dr. Neville's head here, you're really asking some questions that are really, really tough and aren't just relating to what's going on in the book. You start asking questions about humanity as a whole, about the real world. And I like to say with books, I like them to be an escape. So this was one of those first books where I felt like really was allegorical. And it presented it in a way that I never felt like it was preachy. That's the kind of allegory I do not appreciate. But it does ask those questions that I think people were just more content to just keep to themselves in the 50s. But our protagonist here, he longs for companionship, and then when he gets it, he's very distrusting. He's very ugly about it, and that's something that I think scares him, and it's something that he's not able to cope with on a rational level. And yeah, I can't say, guys. I really would like you to read this. I don't want to spoil it, but I think that Matheson faces ugly truths about humanity. And that why would we dehumanize and try to destroy those that are different from us? I think he's one of the first people really asking this and wanting you to give him an answer, and we're not able to give an answer. And what's really, really sad about it is I think that a lot of them, 67 years old, and I think that a lot of these questions we can still apply to today. So I think it's one of those things that are going to make you think. Like I said, you won't just be thinking about the big scary monsters after you finish this. You'll be asking yourself some of these same questions that Dr. Neville is presenting in this book. And it's a powerful theme for 1954. And sadly, like I said, it's a lot of questions we can still find ourselves pontificating about and not having a real answer today. But this is an amazing horror book, guys. It isn't afraid to discuss the tougher questions of the genre, and that's why I think that everybody would really enjoy this, because there's going to be something that everybody can kind of relate to, and everyone can ask that question and think that you might have a different answer from the person sitting next to you. So I know I've talked a lot more about what this book made me think about than what the book is actually about, but I do want you to read it because it is very much a top 10 horror book for me. And not only asking about humanity's place in the world, but because, the solitude, the loneliness, that's something that is just absolutely terrifying to me. Is hey, I got a wife and kids. You know what? Sometimes I enjoy those moments of peace that I get. Don't get me wrong. But after about a day, I'd really be missing my family. I'd be missing someone to talk to, right? So imagine yourself having no other option to talk to. Would you want to keep going on? Especially when once the sun goes down, things get really, really creepy. So guys, that is 1954. I Am Legend. A little bit of a shorter review this time, but plenty to say, but I can't really say too much more without spoiling it. I just really think that you guys should give this one a shot. It's not a high commitment. It's like 200 pages. I think you guys will be able to get through it. It's not difficult to read or anything like that. So drop in the comments, guys, and let me know if you've read I Am Legend. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you there.